welcome back to the Journey to Trust podcast. I'm glad that you chose to continue to tune in. And if you're just tuning in, this is episode 1 of season 2. And we're just going to start a new season because I believe God is entering and ushering me into a new season. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, the Journey to Trust podcast, it's about discipleship. I care a lot about what it means to follow God. And one of the themes that I see throughout scripture in my life, what discipleship and following Jesus is really about, is learning to trust him on a deeper level as we grow as people each and every day. This is a journey. And this journey takes a lifetime. And there's a lot to talk about in this journey. And so what I've been trying to talk about and really flesh out is intimacy and what it takes to have intimacy with God, because I believe it is vital and really important. And it's a cornerstone of what it takes to actually trust God more. We can't trust someone that we're not intimate with. And so we need to be intimate with God in order for us to really trust him more. And so I started fleshing out what intimacy looks like. And I believe it looks like these principles that I've kind of stumbled across. I say I stumbled across, but God knows what he's doing because, you know, he's all powerful and there's no such thing as coincidence with God. In my journey of faith, I stumbled upon recovery in a very, very desperate moment in life as I was struggling with sexual addiction. I was struggling with porn addiction, and I was at a really, really low point. And I came back to a place that I knew was safe. I came back to New York with some people that I knew were safe and that wouldn't judge me, and they would do what they could to help me get to where I needed to go. And as I walked through the doors of recovery, I really realized that recovery is not just about getting better. And recovery is not just about, it's not just about stop sinning. That's what, and it really, recovery to me began to embody what I believe discipleship is really about. It's about getting really, really, really dangerously close to the heart of God. And I say dangerously close because God is, when you think about who he is and the scheme of reality and how much he controls and the length at which he went to actually meet us as people and humanity, to the length that he went to save us as people, he's a consuming fire. And he can't be tamed. And to know that it's possible for me to get close to a powerful being like that, it really is an earth-shattering reality. And so this podcast is all about that. It's all about me trying to take one more step to trusting God more. And so we work through the first principle. The first principle is realize that I'm not God. Realize that I can't control my tendency to do the wrong thing, and that my life is unmanageable. And so first principle, to sum it up, is really about relinquishing control, relinquishing any inclination or compulsion to play God. Principle 2 says, earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to him, and that he has the power to help me recover. So what I want to focus on is that second part of principle 2, that I matter to him, that I matter to him. And the reason why it's taken so long for me to actually get here, if I'm honest, is because this specific point is really, really near and dear to my heart. And it's one of the hiccups that I had early on in my recovery. It's one of those roadblocks that every time I'm in recovery on Thursday and we read those principles, I was like, that I matter to him. When I went through my first couple step studies, that's where I really harped on that I matter to him. And if you're anything like me, when you hear the phrase matter these days, it can kind of spark you into a train of thought that's more political than anything else. I don't mean for this to be political at all. I mean this to be more existential than anything. And what I want to do is continue to work through the passage of the leper and flesh out what this means, what this really does mean to matter to God. And so we're going to be working through Luke. We're going to be working in Luke 5. And I'm going to just talk about this story with this leper. And we're just going to work through a few verses. And in verse 12, it says this: while Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. And now this is the NIV. And the ESV, it says, while Jesus was in one of the cities. I want to stop there because it's important to recognize that right before this, Jesus was in the countryside preaching to a mass of people and giving Peter the biggest catch of fish that he's ever had in his life, so much so that he was absolutely awed and amazed and started to worship God. So he had this experience with God, and he left everything. He left everything to go and follow Jesus. But I want to focus on the fact that he was at the countryside. Now he's in the city. So when we talk about who matters to God, there isn't a specific people group that matter more to God than another people group. The poor don't matter to God more than the rich, and the rich don't matter more than the poor to God. Who matters to God? That's what I really want to flesh out. Who are the kind of people that matter to God? If you look later in Luke in 19, chapter 19, verse 10, it says, Jesus came to seek and save those who are lost. Think about that, because the context of that story was actually talking about Zacchaeus. And if you know anything about Zacchaeus, yes, he was a wee little man, but he was also a rich wee little man. We're talking about a leper here. He was a very, very poor man, poor in so many different ways. And so as we see, what kind of people matter to God? All kinds of people matter to God. There isn't a people that matter to God more than another. So Jesus enters into this city. He enters into the town. And along comes this leper, who I just established is a very, very poor man. He's poor he's poor physically, obviously. He's sick. He's stricken. And his flesh is literally dying. It's leprosy is awful. This is absolutely awful. If you want to look up leprosy and what it looks like, especially biblical leprosy, go look it up. It's absolutely disgusting. But I want to posit that he wasn't just physically stricken. He was socially stricken. So he's physically stricken. He's socially stricken because he's estranged from society. He can't enter into the norms of society. He can't go to the marketplace. He can't go to the synagogue. He can't go to his family. He can only exist within this leper colony that they have set apart specifically to quarantine people because they didn't know how to heal this disease. And so he's really dealing with a lot of poverty here. He's not just dealing with physical poverty where he's sick. He's dealing with social poverty. Like I just said, he's dealing with, he can't go to the synagogue. So he's dealing with spiritual poverty. He's dealing with financial poverty. He can't hold a job. He's all together. When you think about what a holistic, healthy individual looks like, physical, intellectual, social, emotional, financial, spiritual, all of those areas in his life are shot. He has nothing. He is desperate, and he's heard of a man who's healed before. So I heard of what you did to Peter. I've heard of what's the rumblings that's going around in the countryside, and now it's reached the city. I've heard of you, Jesus, and I need to know something. So let's go into this next verse in verse 13. When he saw Jesus, he fell on his face to the ground and he begged him. He fell on his face on the ground and he begged him. This is actually really crazy. I don't know about you, but I don't remember the last time I was so desperate that I fell on my face begging for help. I do remember when I left Tennessee to come to New York, and I was really, really, really desperate because I knew I was on the cusp of destruction. I was right on the edge. I can't really say that I completely understand what this leper feels. But what he says is actually really, really powerful. He says, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. So if you pay attention to the last episode, we fleshed out in the last episode, it's episode 9 of season 1, that you really need to believe that God exists in order to have intimacy with him and with other people. There's no such thing as intimacy with other people outside of reality. And so I need to establish reality. The first reality being, I'm not God. The second reality being, somebody is God. He has to exist. Now, the third reality that's in this spectrum of intimacy, this journey of intimacy, is that I matter to this God, that I matter to him. Now, Jesus does something pretty remarkable. Jesus, what does he do? He doesn't speak. First thing Jesus does, in verse 13, Jesus reached out his hand. Before he said a word, Jesus reached out his hand. Why is this important? Because what the leper is saying, what the leper is asking in desperation is, ultimately it is, hey God, do I matter? Lord, if you're willing, do I matter enough? It's like, because if I matter enough, I know that you can do this. Before he says a word, he reaches out his hand. That's important because a leper, he probably hasn't been touched in I don't know how long. We don't know how old he is. We don't know how long he's been cast to this leper colony. But he probably can't remember the last time somebody even touched him or even came to him to touch him. So Jesus, what he does is he physically embodies something to this man that says, you do matter. And so I believe that the moment Jesus reached out his hand, the man connected. And he said, I am somebody. Jesus reached out his hand. So Jesus touches the man. Jesus does what nobody in this sphere of existence in Jerusalem or anywhere would do. They don't touch lepers unless you want to be like a leper. He reaches out his hand and then he touches him. He says, I am willing. Be clean. He doesn't argue with the man. He meets the man at the measure of intellectual capacity that the man has. He meets him where he is. He incarnates. And this is the story. The beauty of the gospel is Jesus divests himself of any authority, any leverage. He breaks himself down to human understanding to the best of his ability, because God is infinite. God is immeasurable. But he, the immeasurable God, becomes flesh and bones to meet us where we are. And he does this so beautifully with the leper. He enters into his space. He reaches out his hand to touch him because he wants to communicate to this leper, you matter to me. You matter to me. Yes, I'm willing. I am willing. Then he says, be clean. Now what we see is immediately after that, it says, and immediately the leprosy left him. So it gets into, and he has the power to help me recover. That's the other part of the principle. But to focus on, do I matter to him? Yes. I can only experience the wealth of how much I matter to God unless I actually come to an understanding that I need him. I need him. I'm this idea of poverty of spirit is essentially what I'm getting at. That Matthew 5:3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. There's only one way into the kingdom, and that's through poverty. That's through understanding your deep need for God. And for me, this idea of poverty is elusive. It's hard for somebody with things, with a lot of things and a lot of things to be thankful for, to have that reality be consistently present. And that reality isn't always consistently present with me. The reality that I need God isn't always consistently present. In fact, one of the biggest problems in my recovery is I get complacent. I struggle with complacency. I start to coast and I start to think that I do have it together. I'm not like this leper. I'm not stricken and everything around me isn't crumbling. I'm not cast to rock bottom. No. Actually, I can be very, 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 very thankful. I'm not financially in a pinch. Emotionally, I have a wealth of brothers and sisters who I can lean on and depend upon for encouragement, for spiritual edification. I have a relationship with Jesus. Jesus is continually speaking to me and continually showing himself to me through his word, through silence, through nature. I'm a rich person. One of the things that escapes me a lot of times is how much I need him because of all of the things that I do have. Where I start to understand that I actually need God is when I actually think about, in the midst of such blessing, I still am so angry. I'm still resentful. I still battle with unforgiveness. I say that I've forgiven my parents, but there's times where I don't know if I have, and I battle with unforgiveness. And so I'm continually, and that's another thing is, and we'll get to that way later, but forgiveness is not a one-shot deal. I think forgiveness is a process. Forgiveness is a process, just like life is a process. I still struggle with lust. I still struggle with porn addiction and that kind of thing. These are the things that are, in a weird way, my lifeline to reality. These things show me that I actually do need God. These are the things that show me all of the other things that are really, really, really good blessings. They're good, but they're not ultimately reality. There's still something broken within me. I look at society. I look at how everything is crumbling. No, even in society, things are bad. Things are really messed up. And I just feel like one of the things that gets lost, for me, is in the heat of blessing. I lose perspective of how great He is, how much I need Him. And so it's my belief that all of the things that are happening in our context, in our society, in our culture right now are God's work. It's God's work of Him reaching out to us and showing us how weak we really are. And so I believe God is calling us to something extremely great if we're willing to listen. He's calling us to really understand something really powerful that will change and transform our lives if we're willing to listen. And it's that I need God. I believe God is trying to tell us, hey, beyond the smoke and mirrors, beyond societal strife, beyond all of this, there's something that you need to know about me. That I love you no matter what. That there's nothing that can separate you from my love. Here's the catch. Are you desperate enough to reach out for that love? If you're not desperate enough to reach out for God's love, you can never experience it. So that's intimacy principle number 2, and it is that I need to recognize how much I matter to God. So I can testify to that a little bit. I struggle with how much I matter to God. There's a lot of things that go into that, and I'll delve into that deeper, but I think I feel led to just end that right there. Is where are you at? Are you in a place where circumstances externally and internally kind of rattled you and they're shaking you to the core, and you feel like, oh, I don't know what to do with myself or life right now, and I'm feeling more anxious than ever? Or are you resting in the reality that God is in control, that He does care about you, that you matter to Him? It's just like, don't worry about tomorrow and what tomorrow brings. It's like, look at the lilies in the valley. Look at the birds. He clothes the fields with splendor. He feeds nasty ravens. You mean so much more to Him than these nasty birds. You mean so much more to Him than creation, and He takes care of it. You matter to Him. And I know it's hard to rest in that reality, but it's true. And so my prayer, as we close this out, is that one, I really sink into the reality that I matter to God. I have to really sink into the reality that He's bigger than our circumstance. He's bigger than our situation. And that He really does care to reach me right where I am. He cares about me specifically. He wants to reach out. He wants to touch me. He cares about John Ryan Martinez, who lives in Carmel, New York, who struggles with what he struggles with, who's unmotivated, who has all kinds of imbalance, and he's wildly insecure and still struggles with relating and struggles with intimacy with his wife and with other people. And He cares about me. He cares about me. I know He cares about me a lot. He cares about you too. He cares about you too. I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for listening. And I just pray that God will continue to give you the strength to trust Him one step more than you did yesterday. So remember, embrace the process. It's not a quick fix. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while for you to realize how much you matter to God. But lean into it. You matter to Him. Thank you.